in 1932, he was offered a contract with a movie studio in Brooklyn, and he took that contract. And when that happened, that is when Curly became part of the Three Stooges act. So with Shemp gone, most suggest that Curly fill in the role of the third stooge, but Haley felt that Curly, with his thick chestnut hair, believe it or not, he had very thick hair, and his mustache did not look funny. He was too handsome. Curly left the room, returned minutes later with his head shaven. The mustache remained briefly. Haley quipped, "Boy, don't you look girly." Mo misheard the joke as Curly, and who witnessed the exchange realized that the nickname Curly would be a perfect fit. That's how he got his name, Curly. In one of the interviews Curly gave in his lifetime, he complained about the loss of his hair. "I had to shave it off right down to the skin," is what he said. In 1934, MGM was building Haley up as a solo comedian in some feature films, so he dissolved the Three Stooges act to pursue his own career, just like Shemp. The team of Howard Fine and Howard was tired of Haley's alcoholism and abrasiveness and renamed their act the Three Stooges. That same year, they signed on to appear in two reel comedy short subjects for Columbia Pictures. The Stooges soon became the most popular short subject attraction, with Curly playing an integral part in the Three Stooges' work. Thank goodness for Ted Haley's drinking and bad behavior, because if that wasn't so, maybe the Three Stooges would never have formed, and millions of people are glad they did. They have brought so much entertainment and laughter over the many, many years. One of Curly's attributes in being one of the Three Stooges, he developed a reputation. He was known in the act for having an indestructible head, which always won out by breaking anything that assaulted it, including saws. Curly, when he would break a saw, or a saw would break trying to cut his head, he would then quip, "Oh, look, look." So Curly had no formal acting training, but his comedic skills were fantastic. They were exceptional. Most often, directors would simply let the camera roll freely and let Curly improvise. Jules White, in particular, would leave gaps in the Stooge scripts where Curly could improvise for several minutes. In later years, White commented, "If we wrote a scene and needed a little something extra, I'd say to Curly, 'Look, we've got a gap to fill. Fill it in with this woo 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 or some other bit of business,' and he never disappointed us." By the time the Stooges hit their peak in the late 30s, their films had almost become vehicles for Curly's unbridled comic performances. "A Plumbing We Will Go," "We Want Our Mummy," "An Ache in Every Steak," "Cactus Makes Perfect." These shorts display his ability to take inanimate objects like food, tools, pipes, etc., and then turn them into ingenious comic props. Who could forget that battle that Curly had while eating a bowl of soup? I believe it was clam chowder, and he's fighting this clam in this bowl of soup. He took out a spool of thread and he goes fishing for this clam in the bowl of soup. And then, of course, he got frustrated and lost his temper and started smacking into the bowl of soup. Just one of the many hilarious routines that Curly has done throughout the years. Mo later confirmed that when Curly forgot his lines, that merely allowed him to improvise on the spot. It was said, quote, "If we were going through a scene and he forgot his words for a moment, rather than stand, get pale and stop, you never knew what he was going to do. On one occasion, he'd get down to the floor and spin around like a top until he remembered what to say." How about that? Curly also developed some other reactions, expressions that we have all learned to love, tried to imitate, and here are a few of them. I'll try to do them. Please excuse me, they're not anywhere nearly as good as Curly, but he would say, "Yuck, yuck, 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 yuck." And that was his traditional laughter, accompanied by his fingers snapping, his fingers hitting the bottom of his chin, or woo, 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 when he was scared, or that was kind of an underbreath sound that he would make, or la da dee 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 dee. If he was busy working, that was a song that he would sing. Or, of course, this famous expression or word, "certainly," or "I'll miter you." And there are just so many. I'm not going to bore you with any more of them. The best way to listen to these sort of things is to actually listen to Curly do them himself. By 1944, Curly's energy began to wane. You could see his energy was starting to wane. His ill health forced him to rest, leading to only 5 shorts being released in 1945. And I believe the normal output was 6 to 8 a year. And in 1945, Curly was diagnosed with extreme hypertension, retinal hemorrhage, and obesity. The episode Half-Wit's Holiday, released in 1947, would be Curly's final appearance as an official member of the Stooges. During filming in 1946, Curly suffered a severe stroke while sitting in director Jules' white chair, waiting to film the last scene of the day. When Curly was called by the assistant director to take the stage, he did not answer. Mo went looking for his brother. He found Curly with his head dropped to his chest. Mo later recalled that his mouth was distorted and he was unable to speak, only cry. Mo quietly alerted White, the director, to all of this, leading the latter to rework the scene quickly, dividing the action between Mo and Larry while Curly was rushed to the hospital. I guess that's what they mean, the show must go on. And Mo joined Curly after they finished their filming. Curly spent several weeks at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, California, is where it was located. And then he returned home for further recuperation. In 1945, Shemp had been recruited to substitute for Curly, agreed to replace him in the Columbia Shorts, but only until his younger brother was well enough to rejoin the act. So in 1947, Columbia Pictures signed a contract by all 4 Stooges and stipulated that Shemp's joining in place and instead would only be temporary until Curly recovered. Curly partially recovered and with his hair regrown made a brief cameo appearance as a train passenger. I remember that vividly, barking in his sleep in the 3rd film after Brother Shemp's return, Hold That Lion, in 1947. It was the only film that featured Larry Fine and all 3 Howard brothers, Mo, Shemp, Curly, simultaneously. Director White later said he spontaneously staged the bit during Curly's impromptu visit to the stage. Quote, It was a spur-of-the-moment idea. Curly was visiting the set. This was sometime after his stroke. Apparently, he came in on his own, since I didn't see a nurse with him. He was sitting around, reading a newspaper. As I walked in, the newspaper he had in front of his face came down and he waved hello to me. I thought it would be funny to have him do a bit in the picture, and he was happy to do it. Curly filmed the second cameo as an irate chef 2 years later for the short Malice in the Palace. But due to his illness, and that was in 1949. But due to his illness, his performance was not deemed good enough and his scenes were cut. Curly, still not fully recovered from his stroke, met another woman, Valerie Newman, and married July 31, 1947. Although his health continued to decline after the marriage, Valerie gave birth to a daughter, Janie, in 1948. Later that year, Curly suffered a second massive stroke, which left him partially paralyzed. He used a wheelchair by 1950. He went through some more treatment. In February 1951, he was placed in a nursing home where he suffered another stroke a month later, and eventually he went into the North Hollywood Hospital and Sanitarium. In December 1951, the North Hollywood Hospital and Sanitarium advised the Howard family that Curly was becoming a problem to the nursing staff at the facility because of his mental deterioration. They admitted they could no longer care for him and suggested he be placed in a mental hospital. Moe refused to do this, relocated him to another sanitarium, the Baldy View Sanitarium in San Gabriel, California. January 7th, 1952, Moe was contacted on the Columbia set while filming to help move Curly for what would be the last time. 11 days later, on January 18, Curly died. Curly lived the shortest life of the Stooges, dying at the age of 48. He was given a Jewish funeral and laid to rest at the Western Jewish Institute section of Peace Cemetery in East Los Angeles. Curly's older brothers, Benjamin and Shemp, and parents, Jenny, Solomon, are all interred there as well. And we have all the memories. And thank you to Three Stooges, especially to my favorite, Curly Howard. Rest in peace.